Hello, everyone. It is yet another iPhone video, which usually indicates that times are dire. Although in this case, I don't know if you heard, but Trump demonstrated the art of the deal with China and walked us back slightly from what was a totally self-inflicted, unnecessary, ill-conceived, and chaotic tariff gambit with the second largest economy on the planet, from whom we import an enormous number of our consumer goods. But worry not, fear not, guys, as dire as it may have seemed to have 145% or even more tariffs on Chinese goods, which effectively would have amounted to an embargo. No. We've negotiated, we've gone behind the curtain, we've wheeled, we've dealed, and now apparently all is good. The markets have rebounded, and everything is. This was his plan all along. This was his plan. Now, don't point out the fact that like half of the initial proposed tariffs were sort of walked back on quietly and without any fanfare, that they heavily alienated many of our closest allies, that they severely disrupted imports for small and large businesses across the country, that they immediately sort of had to carve out all of the products, such as, phones, television screens, things like that, that would have decimated companies like, for example, Apple, which represents about 6% of the S&P 500 at any given time. No, apparently there's cause for celebration in the street. If, like myself, you spoke to your financial advisor during the initial tariff-induced crash and reallocated your portfolio, maybe you even made some money. Maybe it was even a good thing for you financially. Suffice to say, though, I'm not coming to you guys during a time of extreme economic chaos comparatively. Obviously, the bar is in hell at all times with regards to economic policy. And of course, this is all happening on a backdrop of, sizable tax cuts for the rich and for corporations. Like at this point, things are so chaotic economically on any given day that we don't even notice the sort of standard issue Republican economic nonsense. But yeah, things are overall better on an economic front than they usually are. That being said, we're talking about suspending habeas corpus, essentially eliminating due process, which we've already sort of done in several cases and are likely to continue to do more of. Now, again, this is where Chelsea, who is, very quick to criticize Republicans and particularly Trump, is also going to criticize many of the Democrats that came before him and in between him, which is to say that if you think that America has been exercising a full level of due process on all of its citizens or residents up to this point, including under people like Clinton or Obama or Biden, I think that is very naive. America has definitely not been doing that for quite some time. There have been massive, just slightly less publicized ICE raids throughout basically every presidency of the last decade plus. We've carried out drone strikes against U.S. citizens, not even to mention the untold devastation that we wrought on essentially the entire Middle East at this point. But point being, the scale at which America is violating civil liberties and civil rights is definitely, we're ramping that one up. So I guess we can call the backing off of the most insane of the tariff play a win, and then the potential suspension of habeas corpus, which is already sort of in play at this point, a loss. I'm not sure where that stacks us up at any given point, but I think it's just going to be 3 3/4 more years of this nonsense at any given time. But I am coming to you guys today because I want to just specifically respond to some of the comments that I got on yesterday's Asked and Answered. It's by far caused the most discourse of any of our advice shows, which is not surprising. All the questions were about Trump, and the lead question was, should I divorce my husband who voted Trump behind my back? I'm not going to repeat my answer. It's long as hell. You can go there if you want to see it. generally speaking, you should sort of prepare for that reality, although financially, logistically, it's going to be very difficult for her, given a lot of circumstances, to have anything resembling a clean divorce. And she also shares a child with this man. So suffice to say, nuance extremely needed, and that is why I prefer to do things like this on YouTube and not places like TikTok. Although things are so chaotic at this point that I'm like, maybe I should just start dispensing advice by Vine. We get 6 seconds. That's the nuance we deserve at this point. But unsurprisingly, there were, a ton of comments saying, yes, absolutely leave him, don't look back, serve him tomorrow, which I think is probably unrealistic, again, for financial/logistical reasons. And then, of course, unsurprisingly, an enormous amount of hateful comments from men calling me, forever alone, grizzled, haggard, saddled cat lady, to which I say, dog lady. At least get the animal right. Anyone who knows me knows I am a dog lady through and through. I love myself a dog. Some of the other questions on that episode were about kind of staying sane in the Trump era. And my overall response to those questions / tone, which kind of differed from Erin's, which is why I like doing the show with her, because we sort of have pretty different takes on this. My tone was maybe a little bit more harsh than it is in some of my videos, where, kind of some of what I was saying was like a little bit get over yourself with regards to, how do I consume news in a way that doesn't make me, want to evaporate, or, how could I raise my child in, this environment? And I want to be, listen, there were some comments, not many, but there were some comments that I do want to, address in good faith that were sort of saying, why are you sort of berating your audience for feeling stressed or anxious when you are also stressed and anxious, which I don't think is a fair representation. But alternatively, I can't believe your answer to the question is you have money, so you will be fine under Trump. That is not my answer. I want to be very, very, very clear about that. However, part of the reason that we do the show, but that I do these videos in particular, these sort of real talk youth counselor rap sessions, is because I am a person of great privilege. And with that comes a level of responsibility. I have a responsibility to keep myself very informed, frankly, more informed sometimes than I would like to be, to try and synthesize information as best I can, to try and provide resources to help people. I don't know if you guys saw, but later this month, we're doing like a totally free workshop about like navigating a recession financially. We've been doing a lot of content about that, like trying to essentially provide some sort of voice of, financial clarity and stability and, while still having my political values for whoever it matters to, for whoever is helped by it, even in small ways. I consider it a responsibility of my platform. Having such a large platform, I think that's an important thing to do, but I also consider it a responsibility of my privilege. And I want to say, because there were people in the comments saying, some people, like, for example, green card holders, they may not be okay. I want to be very clear. My husband's a green card holder. A green card holder, by the way, who has already been forced to leave the country for 2 years during the last Trump term on, completely spurious technicalities with regards to his green card application. That was a 2-year-long, very expensive, legally protracted nightmare to get him back in the country. It also happened, we got the news that he had 72 hours to vacate literally the day the borders closed with Canada due to COVID. Talk about a dark night of the soul that I experienced. My sort of spring 2020 was, I think actually at some point I just started breaking with reality because too many bad things were happening at once. But even in that story, even in the fact that he's already been forced to leave the country, even in the fact that he is a green card holder with a loudmouth yappy bitch for a wife who's constantly going off about politics and specifically about Trump on a very large platform, which does put him at some level of real risk that we have talked about on many occasions, we are still, even within that category, deeply privileged people. He is white, I'm white, but he is white. He is very handsome. I'm sorry. No, he's white. He's from a visa-free travel country, which is in and of itself a huge thing. For example, when he had to leave the country before, we were still able to see each other as tourists, which is an enormous privilege that many people don't have, even people who aren't trying to navigate immigration. So that's a huge privilege. We have substantial money that can help fund lawyers and a second residence if needed, and we can buy flights on a moment's notice. I work remotely if needed. He can work remotely if needed. Like, there are so many layers of privilege, even within the disadvantages that we do have, that we are also lucid about. For myself, yes, I'm a woman. Yes, that does put me at some level of risk, but I am a white woman. I am an affluent white woman. I live in a state that you can still, if you're pregnant and don't want to be, you can get that done here. I live in a state that gives you 12 weeks of reimbursed maternity leave for your employees. Like, I basically, compared to a lot of states in America, living in New York City, we have free 3K here. We have public transit everywhere, bike lanes everywhere. We have so many resources. Like, I might as well be living in Scandinavia compared to how someone is living in Mississippi with regards to things like the resources available to us and the difference that it is to be a woman in a state like this versus another one. Does that discount the very real threats that are posed to women overall in America? Absolutely not. But is it a complete difference of amplitude that I need to be lucid about and then transfer into some level of responsibility? Yes, I believe so. To sum it up for me, what I think about this time, even in moments when I feel extremely anxious, very acutely worried for my husband, or any other number of feelings that are valid and real, I also feel like it is not about me. My best friend in the world is a trans woman. We were just walking literally 30 minutes ago, and she was talking about a new poll out about how 52% of Americans essentially side with Trump on a lot of trans issues. Like, the level of threat, even in New York State, the level of threat represented to her by this administration, and quite frankly, even by other administrations, by the state of the world right now, the way that trans people are being targeted, attacked, and demonized there is just such a level of scale that it would not be right for me to be so focused on myself and my own anxieties during a time when there is someone like her. And I could name 30 other sort of demographics of people who I know and see in real life every day who have infinitely more reason to be concerned. Does that mean I shouldn't be concerned? Absolutely not. But it does confer a certain level of responsibility to focus outward on what you're doing and what you're contributing to this situation rather than focus inward on your own anxiety. So for example, if you are and listen, I know the demographics of my audience, right? We can see them on the back end of YouTube. Overall, the women mostly watching this channel are higher education than most. Many of them have, master's degrees and beyond. They are higher income than average. Not all. I know some of you in the comments are going to be saying, well, I'm not higher income, but many of our audiences, they are concentrated primarily in more urban areas and in bluer states. And I don't actually know, I don't think we get a racial breakdown on them, but I would assume, given the racial breakdown of the country, that a lot of them are white as well. A lot of them are heterosexual as well. A lot of them just tick a lot of boxes where, yes, things are bad for them, but they're pretty far down on the scale of how acutely things are bad for them compared to, Biden or even Obama. So when you have people who are saying, I don't know how to I don't know how to consume news in a way that doesn't make me crazy. Okay, well then focus on things other than consuming news. How involved are you in your own local communities, in your politics, in your mutual aid? What are you doing to turn that anxiety outwards and to help someone who can't necessarily fight in the same way? Are you fighting for people who, for example, would be at risk of, a violent arrest by ICE or deportation? Are you able to speak up when other people might have their green card rescinded? Are you able to, stand in front of a trans person or, an immigrant or any of these other groups that are so actively being targeted that they may not be really able to do much other than to feel anxious, that even their very right of things like peaceful protest or political activism or political engagement, even those things are not granted to them in the same way right now. So I really think that, not to quote that, I think it was Jemima Kirk meme, it's like, you guys think about yourselves too much, but if it is truly putting you in an unsustainable mental health place to be consuming news in the way you are, or in any way really, like, then step back from the news and focus on the 50 other things that you could be doing that could actually be of help to people. Go volunteer for a soup kitchen if it's really that serious. Like, there are just a million things you could be doing. And if you are a person of privilege, it does not mean you're automatically going to be safe from every danger. It also very much depends, as far as an affluent person, on what kind of affluent person you are. There are many more, there are also levels of risk within that. But generally speaking, for example, if you had enough money, enough financial and professional flexibility to flee the country if you needed to, you're already in a vastly different position than many of the people who would most desperately need that if things take a more serious turn. And I do think that if you are a person who has that level of privilege in times like this, it is your responsibility to turn that outward and to think about what you can do to make sure that other people even approach the level of safety that you are experiencing as a default. And again, it's not a perfect safety. It doesn't mean you're not stressed. It doesn't mean you're not anxious. It doesn't mean things aren't bad. It just means that there are levels to this, and you have to know and be self-aware about what level you're on. And similarly, when we talk about, the parents in New York City, for example, who have felt so acutely stressed and threatened specifically about being parents in the Trump era. This is not to say that there are not unique stressors to that I, as a child-free person, will never be able to understand. Obviously, there are. But it's so important to remember that for so many parents and so many children in this country, but especially here in places like New York, where wealth inequality is so drastic, things were already scary and dangerous and precarious under Biden and under Obama. If things are just now feeling very dire to you in a way that they never were before, that is also a privilege that is worth checking. That is also something that is worth considering and unpacking. And again, there is a tendency, whether it is towards your children as a parent or towards yourself as an individual, when we feel stressed, when we feel anxious, there is such a tendency to draw in further on ourselves, our immediate circles, our immediate families, our children, etc., and to focus on their safety, their health, their this, their that, when in many cases you may not be the person who is nearly the most at risk. But there likely are people around you all the time, people in your neighborhood, people in your kids' schools, people who you here in New York City that you ride the subway with, or if you drive a car that you share the highway with to commute, who are at drastically more risk. And not just for, I think, the greater good of society and for that sort of ethical responsibility, but I genuinely think for mental health, the more that we are turning outward and the more that we're thinking of the other people around us who, could drastically stand to benefit so much more from just a little of this effort. If we were to take 1 hour of doom scrolling and turn it toward mutual aid or turn it toward a local campaign, who would benefit so drastically, I actually think that's much better for our own mental health. And I'm not here to assign individual privilege to any one person. I am asking us all to think of our own levels of privilege, our own levels of risk, and how different the world is for us now versus the way it was before. I'm asking us to all be honest with ourselves. And I really do think that this call to focus more outwardly and to focus less on informing ourselves in ways that aren't productive and more on taking action in ways that are. And again, it's part of the reason why getting our own finances in order is so important, because from a practical perspective, we have to put our own masks on, and achieving a level of financial stability is also an enormous gift that we can then turn outward. We can then support others. We can support causes. We can volunteer our time. We can work on multiple things. There is a level of privilege in terms of the action that it provides us, not just the actual financial comforts. So this was long and rambly, as these iPhone rants tend to be. But I just wanted to say that, do I think that it's not right to be stressed out or anxious or upset about what's happening in our country, regardless of if you are the most privileged human being within the country? Absolutely not. Everyone has a right to be stressed out and anxious. Lord knows I have been very upset. I've cried tears. I've doom scrolled, I've done all of the things that I'm describing. But I do think it is so important when we're feeling that real unproductive sense of panic to check in with ourselves, see how privileged we truly are. Really try to think about that. Think about the ways in which we have a level of not just that privilege ourselves, but a level of protection and resource that we can provide to other people in our lives. As I've said on previous videos, save an emergency fund for yourself, but what about an emergency fund for the other people in your life? What if someone in your life needs an abortion and can't get one? Maybe you could afford it for them. What if people seriously injure themselves and can't even go to the hospital because now they're afraid of getting dragged out and deported and sent to essentially a prison camp with no due process? Like, at the end of the day, if you have this privilege, financial and otherwise, I just would so encourage you to think about ways in which you can turn it outward. And if you can't bear to stay informed and it all feels too overwhelming for you, fair enough. Then close the laptop screen, get out there and do something with that time and do something with that energy. That is my point. And if it comes across as blamey, shamey, I'm sorry. I really apologize. But as someone who was diagnosed with real deal generalized anxiety disorder and has had some serious flare-ups over the past few years, I understand how isolating and terrorizing true anxiety spirals and panic attacks and things like that can feel. But we must find practical, sustainable ways to overcome those feelings because this fight is going to be long. It already is long, but it's going to be quite a bit longer. And as I've said in previous videos, the work of being a citizen is constantly fighting for that better world. And if you are a person of privilege, you bear the luxury and the responsibility of finding very active ways that you can be doing that. And doom scrolling and obsessing are not those ways. Bye, guys.